Welcome back to Local 4 Live. Unfortunately, this summer, a lot of kids have been shot. Some of those shootings were an accident. In fact, gun violence is the leading cause of death for kids right now. And while there are plenty of responsible gun owners, it is easy for kids to get a hold of a gun, especially if they are not stored properly. But how do you know what's happening in your kid's friend's house? Well, take a look at this map. This is from the Gun Violence Archive, showing the amount of shootings involving children between 2014 and 2024. As you can see, the color light up in the Detroit metro area. I think I'm having a hard time seeing it, to be honest with you. A recent U of M study showed 54% of parents have never asked other parents if there were guns in their home before letting their kids go there. So it could be an uncomfortable conversation, sure, but I do want to reiterate that there are plenty of people with guns that store them safe, and this really isn't a problem. But the number of parents reluctant to talk about this, that's the problem. So I talked to the leader of the Michigan Department of Health and Human Services to get some ideas on how to make these conversations just a little bit easier. Dr. Bagdasarian, thank you so much for joining us here. This conversation is one of those that, as all of us know, needs to happen, but is a difficult, uncomfortable one to happen. It shouldn't be, but it is. So I guess the state is trying to make it less icky. Is that a good way to put it?
Exactly, exactly. So, we have to recognize that gun violence is now the leading cause of death in our children. So, children around the country and in our own state here in Michigan. Gun violence kills more children under the age of 19 every year than things like drownings and childhood cancers and motor vehicle accidents. So we've got to really raise awareness about how dangerous guns are when they are left unattended and unsecured around kids. And I think part of that is giving parents and other caregivers tools to start talking about this topic.
What's tough is that I know you've said it before. You will ask other parents, are there weapons in the home? Are they secured? But what kind of reactions do you get? Like, I think some people are offended when that question is asked.
Well, everyone knows what their home situation is like. So everybody knows if they have weapons and how their weapons are stored. But what you don't know is when you're sending your kid to a sleepover or for a play date, what that other home situation is going to look like. And so I started when my son was younger and when he started going over for play dates and sleepovers, I started asking questions about, do you have weapons in the home and are they securely stored? And people gave me odd looks because I don't think this is a conversation that is happening very often. And in fact, there was a recent study done by the University of Michigan where they looked at Michigan families and whether they were aware about safe storage and whether they were having these conversations. And of the families that were aware that this was a topic that they should be asking about, only about a third of them were actually having the conversation. And I think it's because it has been uncomfortable. So people tend to avoid this topic.
What's your advice then? Do you kind of open it and say, I don't mean to offend you. I'm sure you are a responsible owner, but I have to ask the question for my own peace of mind?
I think that's a great way of framing it. And, if you're asking it of everyone and every single time, then it can't really be anything that someone is offended about you only asking them. It's just something we've got to destigmatize. And I think it's something we've got to talk about with other parents when our kids are socializing with their kids. It's also a topic we've got to talk about with our kids. And we've got to teach them that if they are in a situation where they come across something that looks like a weapon, they can't assume that it's a toy. They can't assume that it's unloaded. In fact, there was a recent study about a year and a half ago from the CDC where they looked at about 1,200 unintentional firearm injuries and deaths in children. And what they found was, especially in that youngest age group, the 0 to 5, 99% of those firearms were stored, loaded, and unlocked.
Mm.
And they looked at the circumstances around many of these injuries and deaths. And what they found is that where parents and other caregivers were storing these firearms were in places like the top shelf of a closet or in a nightstand or under a mattress. And we know that our kids are curious. We know that our kids are going to look around all these spaces and they
Into
find.
everything. Yeah.
Exactly. They know where weapons are. They can find these things. A lot of little ones assume that these weapons are toys when they find a weapon. Many of the older kids assumed that the weapons were unloaded and couldn't be fired. And those types of assumptions can lead to injuries and deaths.
I hope that by parents asking other parents these questions, it will also get some people, gun owners, to open their eyes and maybe store them more responsibly if they weren't.
Absolutely. I think everyone wants the best for their kids. Everyone wants the best for their communities. Nobody wants kids to be injured or harmed in any way. We all want the same thing. We're trying to prevent these types of injuries and deaths. And I just want people to know that there are tools out there. One tool is having conversations, destigmatizing some of these conversations, and we've got a little flyer here that you can actually pick up starting in August at any of the MDHHS county offices around the state, as well as free gun locks. They're very, very simple to use. And I just want to raise awareness that these tools exist because we all want the best for our kids. We all want to protect their safety, protect their lives and health. And these are some simple ways that we can do that.
Unlocks, as you mentioned, are very easy to use, right?
They're very easy to use. So they look essentially like a bike lock, and they go through the barrel of the gun, and you lock it. There's a little key, and you keep that key somewhere separate. Very easy to use. They come with instructions, and again, these are available for free. We're giving them away at all MDHHS county offices around the state. You can just stop in and pick them up, no questions asked. And it's one way to make sure that your kids or kids who are coming over to your house are safe.
Going back to the conversation with other parents, have you ever encountered a situation where somebody was kind of indignant about it and said, "I'm, don't worry about it, it's fine"? How do you press that, and when does it get to a point where you say, "You know what, my son, my daughter, they're not going to be playing here if we can't be safe about this"?
I've never been in a situation where someone has been indignant or upset about this. People have raised eyebrows when I bring this up. People have sort of said, I've never been asked that before, but no one has been upset. Now, I could imagine that you're in a situation where somebody could get offended, could get upset. And that's really what we want to avoid. We want to just make this a normal part of the conversation, just like, when you're having your kid ride in a car with someone, you might say, can you just make sure he wears a seatbelt?
Yeah.
Just as innocuous and normal as that. I think all of these conversations have to be managed on a case by case basis. There's not going to be a one size fits all, but I'd love to just start normalizing this so that we're all asking each other about secure storage.
So then let's talk about the kids then. What are we telling our children about what to do if they do happen to find a gun?
So one of the things that I always tell my son is that if he is in another person's home and he sees something that looks like a gun, he cannot assume that it's a toy. Gun manufacturers are now manufacturing weapons that come in all kinds of bright colors. They might be neon pink, they might be neon orange. So, a bright color or something that looks like it's plastic, you can't assume that it's a toy. And so, going over to someone's house and finding something and then playing with it, assuming it's a toy, is one thing that we talk a lot about. Don't assume. If my son is going over to someone else's house, we've also talked about if you're finding something that looks like a weapon and you're being told that it's not loaded. My family always keeps this unloaded. Again, don't assume that it's unloaded. Even if you check and it looks like it's unloaded, you don't know if there is, a bullet in the barrel. So I think making those kinds of assumptions and just handling all of these guns, look-alike guns, as though they are real is really important.
With some of the laws that have passed, are you seeing at least a minimal drop in accidental deaths?
I think it's going to take some time before we really see a reduction in those numbers. I think having laws out there are a first step. And I'm so glad that we have these types of laws, but we need to raise awareness. So we can have a law about safe storage, but if we're not raising awareness and people don't know what safe storage is, or they don't know how to securely store their weapons, then we're not doing folks any favors. So I think that we can pass all the laws we want to, but we've got to make sure that the education, the information, and tools like these gun locks are in people's hands to really make a change.
Just to highlight that, the information, the brochure, and more importantly, the gun lock, available free any county health department, right?
Any county MDHHS office.
Right, right.
Yeah. So there are lots of other places in the state that you can pick up free gun locks. Lots of pediatricians and other health systems are giving these away and also encouraging the conversations. This one I actually picked up at my local VA hospital yesterday, but they are also available at all the MDHHS county offices. And you can pick up a copy of this brochure starting in August.
So thank you so much for your time this morning.
Thank you.